Hello, my name is Pepe and there's someone very special I'd like you to meet. Their name is Sam. Sam's a pretty typical baby. She was born in a hospital to two loving parents, and when she goes home, her life will be probably a lot like yours. Her house has a refrigerator, a television, and her parents even own a car to get them to and from work. But what you might not know is because of Sam's family income, she's at risk of being in poverty.
And this will have a lot of effects, particularly on Sam. Because of Sam's situation, Sam will be less likely to graduate high school than her peers. She'll be more likely to stay impoverished, and she might even have a lower life expectancy than her more affluent peers. Sam's story does not match what most of us think of when we imagine poverty in the United States. And while people who face serious material deprivation, like the starving and the homeless, do exist in the United States, as noted by scholars like Robert Rector, they do not represent the full spectrum of what it means to be impoverished in the U.S. In the United States, we use the official poverty measure, or the OPM, in order to measure poverty. The OPM was made in the 1960s and was based around a typical family and what the researchers considered a sufficient amount of income to provide for that family's basic food, clothing, shelter, and utilities. Now, the OPM does a good job of capturing most poverty in the United States. However, it fails to capture a number of changes that have happened in the past 50 years and a number of nuances in poverty. For Sam, this means that the OPM does not account for her parents not being married. Furthermore, it doesn't account for Sam's house being more expensive because of the state they live in. And it also doesn't account for the immense stress that Sam's parents face as they struggle to get enough hours each week to cover their bills. Researchers have proposed other, newer measures to help account for some of the failings of the OPM and also to capture more of the complexity of poverty.
The supplemental poverty measure was created for the purpose of helping account for situations like those faced by Sam's family, in which the two partners' income isn't high enough to pay for the basic needs of the family unit without being at risk for being in poverty, because of factors like a high rent and high local taxes in the area in which they live. Their lack of a marriage status keeps their family from receiving some welfare grants that would help ease the stress on their daily lives and help them not have to make as many sacrifices to keep from being at risk for being in poverty. No measure of poverty is perfect. No measure of poverty can possibly account for the different situations and needs of all individuals and family units. But some definition that classifies people who are to be considered at high risk, at risk, or at low risk of being in poverty must be created in order for us to help fellow Americans who are struggling to meet their basic needs. Howard Pickett once said, "We can still move forward if we don't agree on the same definition." So here's our definition, and if not everyone agrees with it, then that's okay. A person is either at risk or at high risk of being in poverty if they are unable to meet some or all of their physical, emotional, or financial needs because they must make sacrifices in order to ensure that they or their loved ones can acquire the food, water, shelter, clothing, utilities, healthcare, education, dignity, and self-confidence needed to live a life that is, by their standards, livable.
Our definition is informed both by the OPM and the SPM, and also work by people like Nussbaum, who categorize poverty less on the lack of specific physical items and more on the lack of specific capabilities.
Nussbaum defines capabilities as the totality of the opportunities a person has for choice and action in her specific political, social, and economic situation.
As such, when we say that a person has to make significant sacrifices, we mean that they are having to deny themselves a certain capability in order to satisfy something else.
Under this definition of poverty, Sam's family certainly falls into the category of at risk of being in poverty. Poverty shouldn't just be measured by placing all people struggling to different extents to meet their very different needs under one category, under the blanket term poverty. Although there are many potential ways to measure poverty, We believe that poverty should be measured based on considering the extent to which a person is at risk of not being capable of meeting their basic needs. For example, Sam's family should be categorized as being at risk for not having the capability to meet their basic needs, while a family exactly like Sam's living in a region with a lower cost of living would be categorized as at low risk for not having the capability to meet their basic needs, while a person living on the street would be categorized as being at high risk for not having the capability of meeting their basic needs. Using a category system to measure poverty is a better alternative to the OPM, which creates an income threshold that families either fall above or below. Even though the SPM attempts to account for more varying situations in generating its income threshold, the category system is still a better alternative to poverty measure systems that are so focused on a quantitative income number. A category system based on risk is the best way to measure poverty because it considers different people's different capabilities to meet their basic needs. Instead of putting all struggling individuals and family units who each have different needs and capabilities into the same category of poverty, let's use this tiered categorical system. This system of measurement helps the American populace understand that poverty is a complex situation that has different effects on different people's lives. Remember, we see living in poverty as being unable to meet some or all of one's physical, emotional, or financial needs because they must make sacrifices in order to ensure that they or their loved ones can acquire the food, water, shelter, clothing, utilities, healthcare, education, dignity, and self-confidence needed to live a pleasant life. Because of this, we believe that a measurement system that puts the risk of being in poverty into separate categories accounts more for the differences between people is a better way of measuring poverty than simply using one category of poverty created by an income threshold.
Supporters of the OPM might rightly point out that our measure is more complicated than theirs, and to that we say it is. Our measure is more complicated than the OPM because poverty is more complicated than the OPM would have you believe. Our measure paints a more accurate depiction of poverty in the United States, which gives the public the tools they need to have better discussions and to more effectively combat poverty. To those that say our measure does not go far enough, we say that no measure can fully depict the nuance of each individual story. But we believe that our measure strikes a balance between the practical implementation and moral considerations in measuring poverty. In particular, our move away from a binary measure and towards risk categorization will drastically improve how Americans of all different backgrounds understand the complex nature of poverty in the United States.
Hypothetically, the national government should issue the funding it would spend on calculating and generating the statistics it would for the OPM and SPM to the states, who would distribute it to their various local governments. These local officials would create teams to investigate the levels of risk of poverty faced by individuals in their communities and come up with constructive ways to help the people at risk or at high risk of being in poverty. Local news stations should be reporting the findings of this data collection, not national TV networks, because being at risk for poverty is best understood when viewers can contextualize it on a local level. Also, when citizens watch the local news and find out about the people at various levels of risk of poverty in their area, they feel more connected to their fellow neighbors and feel more inclined to help them by volunteering or running for public office.
We acknowledge that this, like any measure, is imperfect and that data practices for collecting and recognizing trends will have to be established. But we believe that we have laid out a compelling argument for a new alternative to the way we measure poverty in the United States. For more information, please check the link below to see all of our citations. Thank you.